Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining this Tech Talk episode number 3 of 2024. We're going to be discussing today, we're going to be unraveling the complexities of workforce management. It's a very, very important topic. I am Joe Rafanelli. I am the Director of Technical Solutions here at Macrosoft. And Macrosoft, what we do is we are a software development company. We have a powerful combination of business experience, right, and then technical expertise providing clients with best-in-class software development solutions. We also do staffing services. We also do that very, very well. I want to thank Paul here for joining. Paul is our special guest here today, Paul Fucci. He leads up our staffing services business. Paul is new to Microsoft, but he is not new to this for staffing services. I want to welcome Paul. Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate the warm introduction. Just want to thank all our guests for joining us today. As Joe mentioned, my name is Paul Fucci. I'm a senior sales associate at Macrosoft, responsible for our staffing and recruiting and enterprise solutions. I've been at Macrosoft since January, but as Joe mentioned, I'm no stranger to the staffing industry. Been in sales for 25 years. 20 of those years have been in the human capital management space, and about a decade of staffing experience is what I have.
Absolutely. We're excited to get started. Okay, so as we're saying here, we want to talk about the trends of 2024. So why don't we start there? Probably folks are going to be most interested in that, so we'll start with that question. So go ahead and tell us about 2024 trends as it relates to staffing services.
Okay, so these are some very interesting times, 2024. We've exited COVID now, and you see situations where companies maybe did some overhiring in COVID, because during COVID, if you remember, Joe, we actually had companies that, we had the lockdowns, people couldn't go into work. Some people were working remotely, some people got laid off, and there were some issues. Then, once companies figured out, okay, we can still work, but we're going to have to work remotely. Then companies opened up the floodgates, started hiring in IT and technology, especially since you had remote workers. So there were positions that weren't filled previously that needed to be filled, additional positions that needed to be filled, because some companies, again, to account for the remote workers, as well as accounting for increased business, because some industries actually did very well during COVID. So people overhired. So we're dealing with that now. So I see a little bit of a slowdown in 2024 because of this overhiring. There are companies out there that are still hiring, but there's also companies that are laying off. As you notice, that employment is creeping up. It's not as bad as it was in the industry of when I was first started out in 2008, 2009. It's not as bad as that, but one trend I do see is the fact that companies don't have the budget and they're paying their employees less money. And what that translates for us is, if clients don't have the budget, that means they can't pay us as much money as they used to, and that translates into we aren't able to pay our employees as much as we used to. So wages have gone down as a whole. And now another thing that's interesting is return to work. A lot of people, and that shrinks the candidate pool out there, because a lot of people are used to COVID and they don't want to go back into an office anymore. I talk to a lot of candidates that say they just want to, work remotely. I look at it this way. We're in the office a few days a week. I look at it this way. I get to work from home 2 days a week. I'm used to being in an office. So I guess it's fortunate for those 2 days that I don't have to commute. And one main thing that is happening in the IT and tech space is there's a skills gap. Now, what do you mean by a skills gap? Well, there's a lot of technologies out there that we don't have enough people, especially in developers. We don't have people that have the right skill sets to fill these positions or work on specific projects. So that's why a company like Microsoft, what we've done, we have an office, a Microsoft office in India and Pakistan. So we can try to shrink the skills gap and fill in those gaps with talent in those two offices. And I think one way we can actually solve this in general is bringing more women into technology. I truly believe that women adding more women in technology will help shrink the skills gap. Women make up at least 50% of the population. So, and there's not a heck of a lot of women involved in technology. So if we encourage young women when they're middle school, high school, college to get involved in technology type majors and take up and take technology courses, they could get involved in the tech space, and what it helps will help them get into leadership positions. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of leadership positions at the very high levels of companies that that are at the C level. So figure every big company has at least 3 technology C level positions: a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, and a CISO, which is chief information security officer. So that'll help women in their career paths if they get involved in more technology. So I think if we could encourage these young women to get involved, I think that'll help lessen the skills gap in the United States.
No, well said, Paul. Very well said. And I know Microsoft has a program for that. We have Microsoft University. We'll bring in the young kids and we'll train them. So, but yeah, that's something we don't normally talk about a lot, is the women in technology. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So we've got a couple questions that we're going to go through. And when we talk about it, we think, look, what are the questions that are going to be most resonate with potential folks that are joining the call? And one comes to mind is, like, what makes Microsoft different, right? There's a lot of agencies out there. So what makes us different?
That's a great question, Joe. So the most obvious answer to that question is Microsoft has Joe Rafanelli and Paul Fucci, and the other agencies don't. So that's an easy answer, but I'm sure you weren't looking for that one. I'd say three major things that really set us apart is relationships that we've developed over the past 30 years. The relationships that we have as Microsoft employees with our clients, with our colleagues, our fellow Microsoft colleagues, as well as with our employees and the folks we work with. That's one thing that we have great relationships. And another thing about Microsoft is we have a very high employee retention rate, very high. Probably one of the, I'd say from other companies I've worked for, probably a lot higher than what I've seen and I'm used to. And the reasons that we do have a high retention rate is we treat our employees well, we pay them well, offer great benefits, and management is accessible. We have a very flat organization here, meaning that fact that, Joe, you and I, we report directly to the CEO of the company. So there's not a lot of layers of management involved in this. So people appreciate that because they have servant leaders that can help them do their job and help them throughout their career. And the training is fantastic also. And lastly, is visa sponsorship. Like I said, there's a talent skills gap in the tech space right now. And so what we'll do is we have, as I mentioned, we have an office in Pakistan. We have an office in India. We can bring our talent over there and bring them into the United States and sponsor their visas. Or if, we need additional Python developers, we don't have anybody on our bench at Microsoft, we could bring people over and sponsor their visas that are coming from other countries. So those are the reasons why I say we're different.
Absolutely. Especially that last point you brought up about the visas. And I know a lot of folks don't do that because a lot of paperwork goes on with that. So we do handle that. That's a great point to bring up. Okay. We'll move on. So what are the staffing options? What are the staffing options, that Microsoft offers? Maybe we could just give us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I would say I'll talk about four main ones. The first one is managed teams or project-based work. Joe, you're very familiar with that. If someone,
Sure.
you know, is going from Visual Fox Pro to a .NET environment, we can handle that, and we can provide them with a team that can do that for them, so they can go about their normal everyday business. So that's one way we could actually assist our clients. Another way is by and you hear a lot in the industry, staff augmentation. What that really is having a temporary worker or a contract worker work for our clients for a set period of time, and then the client would pay us for the amount of hours on a time and materials basis that employee actually works on the client's behalf. Third option is direct hire or permanent placement. That's definitely in our wheelhouse, but it's not a big priority for our clients, at least, as much as the contract or project-based positions. So, for instance, if someone they have an IT project manager opening because their IT project manager just quit and they need to fill that position as a full-time employee, we can provide them with the candidates for that. And last is contract to hire. What that is, and I think that's a great model that we do have. One of my clients used to refer to contract to hire as try to buy. So that's when we offer a person at an hourly rate to our clients. And then if they like that person and they feel that person's a good fit and the employee is interested in working for the client, that contract to hire person could be converted to a full-time permanent employee.
Perfect. So many options. Can sum it up in one word: very flexible. We're very flexible in everything you just said. So that's awesome. Okay. So let's talk about the types of skilled positions, right? And then what industries Microsoft specializes in.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So primarily, Microsoft focuses on IT and technology-based positions. However, we have filled other types of positions for our clients, such as in payroll, finance, operations. We can do all different types of staffing, but our focus is mostly IT and technology. Some types of positions that we can fill for our clients are you can go from an entry level position like help desk support, plus software developers, solution architects, managers, directors, VPs, and we can go all the way up to the C level, such as CIO, CTO, CISO, as I mentioned before. So we handle the whole entire gamut, and within those positions, we focus primarily on the commercial private sector. However, we do have clients that are in the public sector, specifically federal government, because recently Microsoft earned our GSA schedule to do work with the federal government.
Fantastic. Again, more flexibility there. All right. Another question that folks normally ask us is about our sourcing and screening, and how do we do the sourcing and screening part of the candidate section. Maybe you can give us a little bit more information about that.
So, Joe, you know me, I'm always prepared. So why don't we show our resource planning screen slide?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to, this is pretty self-explanatory on what each of these mean, but I'd like to focus on point 1.5. And everybody's, looking at me probably right now saying, wait a second, where's 1.5? I don't see it. But it's really in between the requisition request and when it's received and before we start sourcing candidates. We really need to get some information from the client. And that would start with an intake call with the hiring manager, getting a job description and what the salary or pay rate is. And then an intake call is having a hiring manager and finding out what is important to them. That helps us better source candidates and vet candidates before we submit it to the client. And probably the most important slide on this, a number actually is number 4. That is feedback from the manager. Anybody in staffing or recruiting, you need to get feedback. You must, And I don't want, demand is maybe a strong word, but if we're going to do our jobs properly, we need that feedback. So if we send a resume over and that person is missing the mark, we need to find out from the hiring manager where that person missed the mark, what they like about that person, but even more importantly, what they didn't like. Where is that person missing the mark? So we need that feedback from the hiring manager. It's great to get it from talent acquisition or HR, but we really need to know what the hiring manager feels about that particular person. So not only do we need feedback when we send a resume over, we need feedback after every interview. And we want to find out, again, where our candidates hit the mark, and if they aren't moving forward, where they missed the mark. So we can do our job better the next time we present a candidate to a client.
Very comprehensive. In a word, collaboration obviously is key, right?
Great
That
word.
back and forth. We want to get the clients the right fit for the long term. So absolutely, couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's move on. So what I want to understand right now, the fit between the candidate's skill set and the client requirements. I'm sure there's some thought process that goes, along with that. So why don't we go ahead and explain that?
So yeah, I'll definitely explain it, Joe. I actually answered that question a little bit in my previous answers, but it's very important. So it's important enough that I need to stress it again. So you need a written job description from the client, because that helps our recruiters determine, okay, what type of skill sets does that person need to have? What will they be doing? Because when they present a job to a candidate, the candidate's always going to ask for, hey, can you send me the job description? I want to see if it's something that I'm qualified for, number one, and it's going to be, is this something that I'm interested in, number two? So we need to get a written job description from the client. We also need to know what the salary or the pay rate is. We're willing to give our feedback to the client on what we think the salary should be or what the pay rate should be. We're definitely willing to do that, but really we need to know what type of budget the client has. And if the pay rate is a little bit low, we'll let them know. If it's not a competitive pay rate, and tell them why. So that's why they're hiring us as the subject matter experts. And one thing is why I need to have an intake call that with the hiring manager. Intake call is that call where it's you could have. I usually have my intake calls with the hiring manager, find out what is important to them. It's great that there's a job description with 20 bullet points, but of those 20, what's really important? So you need to speak to the hiring manager. It's great if talent acquisition can do that, but you want to hear from the actual hiring manager, the person who our candidate's going to be working with. We want to find out what are the must-haves. So and a must-have example is if the hiring manager says they need 8 years of relevant experience, okay, that tells me that I cannot send a resume over with a person that only has 5 years experience. Okay, so that's a must-have. Nice to have. Someone says, well, if they have a master's in computer science, that's a nice to have. It's not really important. The experience is more important. That's what I want to know. And one thing you need to ask your clients is, why would someone want to work for your company? Because when we're presenting a job to a client, it's a competitive job market. People are looking at the best opportunity. We have to find out we have to tell that candidate why they would want to work for our client. What are the features? What are the perks? What are the benefits? Even what are the benefits of working with the hiring manager? What's their personality like? How do they treat their employees? So those are really things that we really need to do and understand in order for us to do the best job possible for our clients.
That's a good comprehensive list of a deep dive to making sure both sides, you know, understand each other and making sure both sides, there's that fit there, like you had said. I mean, it's not sometimes it's not even just about the skills; it's also about the personalities, right? Making sure the personalities fit. So it's nice that you do that deep dive. Absolutely. So we mentioned about we have U.S. and international, onshore and offshore. So let's talk about the benefits and the challenges about that when it comes to offshore and onshore for staff augmentation.
So let's talk about onshore. Some benefits are, a few benefits are better communication and cultural alignment, um, time zone compatibility, because you want to make sure that we have resources that are working when the client needs them to work. Legal and regulatory alignment. Um, so again, talk about visa sponsorships that we do. Clients don't have to worry about that if someone is actually onshore, and we don't have to worry about that. And another important reason is you need, obviously you need someone onshore if the client needs that person on site for whatever reason. So that's a huge reason where, if they have to be on site, then obviously you can't bring someone offshore into that. So, but there are some challenges. We pay a lot more in the United States, so it's going to cost the client more money. And because of our skills gap that I keep on mentioning, there's a limited talent pool. So, it really depends on what the client's needs are and what their budget is. We can offer offshore as a alternative, and the advantages pretty much are just the opposite for offshore. There's some cost savings because in countries like Pakistan and India, the wages aren't as high, so we can pass that savings over to our clients. And since we have that skills gap, I'm mentioning it again, we have access to a larger talent pool. And these are and some challenges of dealing with offshore. I'll say what in general what people think are challenges, and then I'll give you my opinion. So communication and cultural differences. Well, I don't see that being a big problem. I know I've talked to some clients and they say they want a person that's in the United States, but communication. Everybody I deal with overseas and have dealt with in my career knows English very well in the written form and spoken form. So I don't see that being as an issue. And cultural differences. Now with everybody, it seems like people from different countries throughout the world all have dress the same, talk, have the same similar types of interests. So I don't see that being a big issue. I know another challenge would be time zone differences because there's a huge time zone difference between India and Pakistan and the United States. But there are situations where if a client has specific needs where they need that person to work certain time frames, there may be some flexibility and we can maybe help them with that. Then two other challenges are data security. So when you're in the United States, that's also a challenge too in the United States. But if someone's offshore, they have internet access, and people get hacked all the time. Corporations get hacked. So, that is, data security is a concern. Legal considerations like visa sponsorship. So if you have someone that's offshore and, if they had to come onshore, then you have some visa restrictions, obviously. So those are really the benefits and challenges for offshore versus onshore.
Definitely appreciate the open and honesty there, right? You laid it all out on the table there, so appreciate that, and I'm sure the viewers, appreciated that as well. Okay, so how do you stay current in the job market and the trends? How do you personally do that?
Well, it's regular communication,
Yeah,
communicating with your clients, your prospects, other people in the industry, your candidates, your fellow coworkers. So really, it's communication. Um, Also, another way is LinkedIn has some great information there. People talk a little bit about their journey in and looking for jobs, and hiring managers share stories. So there's a lot of great information on LinkedIn. Um, and also looking at on different online articles that talk about different aspects of HR, human capital management, talent acquisition, business, the economy, the news. You got to understand the economy too. It's very important. Someone in staffing has to understand the economy because it kind of it pulls it all together and makes sense why things are happening. And another way is I'm old school, Joe. I like to read a newspaper every day, and there's two reasons. Because I find out about the economy and what's going on in the world, but sometimes I read some interesting articles that I think are fun, and it makes me a little bit more interesting when I'm talking to people out at different events or talking to clients and prospects, because there's a way to build rapport with folks you're actually working with. So those are really those are some of the things that I do to keep going.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, reading the paper, going on LinkedIn, doing the socials. I don't know what else you can ask for. I mean, that's the way. That's the way to keep up. That's why you knew all you knew when you talked about the trends. So we appreciate that. All right. So those were my 8 warm up questions, if you will. So I believe those are a lot of the questions that folks might have been interested in. However, as we normally do, we're going to ask questions to the audience. We'll just have a little bit of a pause here. So, folks, if you got questions, put them on the chat, please. Okay. So we got our first question here. So it says, what are your fees and how are they structured?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm just going to talk in general terms. So for a direct hire or permanent placement fee, what staffing companies do is they charge the clients a percentage of the annual compensation that they're offering to the candidate. So it's a percentage of annual salary. For contract or temporary employees or staff augmentation, that's agreed upon hourly rate. So for every hour the contract employee works, they get billed by the staffing company a certain hourly rate, and it's on a time and materials basis. So that means someone works 20 hours or 40 hours, they get billed the hourly rate times the amount of hours the employee actually works. Then we have something called contract to hire. What that is, and I mentioned before, it's a little bit of a hybrid of permanent and contract work, where an employee works for the client as a contract employee. And if the client decides to convert them over to a full-time employee, they pay a conversion fee to the staffing company. And that conversion fee usually is less dependent based on how long the employee has been working as a contractor for the particular client. So it's on a decreasing, descending scale. And again, that conversion fee is based on the annual salary, like the permanent placement.
Good answer. I love to hear the options. People love options, so that was good.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Anything else, folks? Okay. Got a second question here. Do you offer any guarantees to direct hire placements?
Great question. I love that question. I grew up and my parents always say, Paul, there's no guarantees in life. Well, they were right on a lot of things, but there are some guarantees, Mom and Dad. We offer a 90-day guarantee on our direct hire placements. What does that mean? So if a employee is terminated by our client, maybe they didn't have the skill set or that the client really needs, or they find out that their performance isn't up to par, then if our client terminates that employee within 90 days of the start date, we will actually find a replacement for our client at no additional fee. And I must stress that the client has to pay the initial fee, which is a percentage of the annual salary, but we do not charge them any additional fees for replacing that candidate, as long as it's within the 90-day time frame.
Seems like a decent amount of time, and it seems fair. So that's a nice number, 90 days. Okay, we have another question. All right, how does your agency handle sudden staffing needs or emergencies? It's a good one too.
So, yeah, it almost seems like every requisition I get it is a staff is an emergency.
Right.
So, but there are times, I'm being facetious, but there are times when there are emergencies. So what I always tell is a new client. So when I'm meeting, I usually have, when I'm meeting with a new prospect, an initial call to find out what their needs are and if we can help them out. Majority of the time we can help a client out and we're a good fit, but you know what? It's maybe they're not always a good fit for the programs that we offer, even though we're very flexible. So I always suggest is to our clients, let's get the paperwork out of the way. Let's get the contracts out of the way, because most staffing companies have a master services agreement known as an MSA and an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So let's get those contracts out of the way, because they can take anywhere between 2 days to up to 2 weeks and possibly longer to get them the contracts ironed out between both companies. So let's get them out of the way. And it doesn't cost the company any money to sign an MSA or an NDA. And I look at it like a fire extinguisher. We see the signs on a fire extinguisher: break the glass in case of an emergency. So you know what? You get the paperwork out of the way, so we don't have to worry about it. So if a client calls me up and says, my IT project manager just quit in the middle of a project, I need someone ASAP. Well, you know what? All we have to do is get on an intake call to get the job description, pay rates, and then we can start sourcing candidates for the client, as opposed to when a client calls me up and a prospect calls me up and say, well, I want to work with you guys. Well, then we have to say, okay, well, do you want us? I'll send you over the NDA, the MSA, their legal reviews it. And that actually is going to hold up the bringing that person on board for the client. So let's get the paperwork out of the way, and then we can handle the emergencies. Not an issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. The contracts always take so much time. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more there. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. We'll give it a few seconds here. Okay. It looks like we're good. So, Paul, thank you so much. Everybody can see your enthusiasm. So, folks, as you guys can see, he's ready to go. He knows he's got a lot of knowledge between those ears. So, thank you for sharing that knowledge. I want to thank everybody
Thank
for
you, Joe.
joining, and I want to thank folks for the chat questions. That they were actually very, very good. If there's anything additional that folks want to talk about, or if you just want to reach out to us, you see Paul's information there, and you see where we're located. We're in Bedminster, New Jersey. For now, I want to thank everybody for the participation, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye now.
Thank you.